Hello and welcome to the program. I'm Kate Williams. Ahead, Seven's ad share slips below 40% as Nine moves in. The launch date confirmed for Bauer Media's new magazine, and Southern Cross Austereo unveils its new on-air teams to advertisers. But first, Australia's first philanthropically funded not-for-profit news website, The Global Mail, is being shut down after its backer Graham Wood withdrew funding. It seems the website will close on February 20. Let's get the details with our co-host James Manning, editor and publisher of Mediaweek. James, thanks for joining us on the program as always.
Okay, yeah, look like it's going to be a tough year in media for
not
just for old media, but for new media people too, looking to build an audience. The Global Mail started with a fair bit of fanfare 2 years ago, run by Jane Nichols. We had her on the program, talked us through a little bit about their sort of plans. I hesitate to call it a business model because they weren't really looking to run a business, not initially anyway. Graham Wood was going to fund it for 5 years, he said.
What's the idea between a not-for-profit news website, though?
Well, yeah, well, I think that was the initial plan anyway.
Right.
I think as a lot of startups do, they just want to build audience, and then they'll worry about, look, when you get a big audience, then you worry about how to monetise that, I guess. And that's what they were going to do. Only lasted 2 years, and it seems he's pulled the plug. He said, look, they never really got to the audience targets he'd sort of hoped for. They were figures that were never sort of published, and I think some of the staff probably didn't know either. But I think it really failed to cut through. Look, maybe it was too highbrow, you know, going really upmarket on the web. You know, you're not going to get big numbers. We haven't seen that yet anyway, so it was pretty tough for them.
Yeah, absolutely. But let's take a look at one news website that is holding its own and, in fact, expanding into the Australian market. BuzzFeed is a new entertainment website with a global audience of around 100 million. It focuses on snack-size, shareable content and integrated advertising. Our co-host James Manning, editor and publisher of Mediaweek, of course, here. But we're also joined by Wiedlin, Chief Revenue Officer of BuzzFeed. Andy, thanks so much for your time. We do appreciate it.
Glad to be here.
Very exciting. So you're launching tomorrow here in Australia?
Yes. Tomorrow's a big day. We wanted to do it on Australia Day, but we're a few days late. We're very excited.
Now, what do you call this? This is an Australian edition? Is it just an Australian office for the main little feed into the one?
Well, if you're an Australian consumer, if you go to BuzzFeed.com, you're going to get a mix of Australian news and world news and US news. But the whole idea is BuzzFeed is a social news and entertainment site dedicated to the most viral content on the web. So people come to our site to find out what's hot and then share it with their friends to look cool. And I guess our key differentiator is it's one thing to read the news, but we want to make it so great that they feel compelled to share it with their friends. And that's how we're getting our traffic, is by sharing across Facebook and Twitter.
So how do you encourage people to share with their friends? Obviously, the content has to be original and exciting, but are there any other secrets to getting news shared?
Yeah, well, BuzzFeed started about 7 years ago, more like an R&D lab than a media company, and we were trying to figure out how and why news gets shared online. And some of it is, if it's compelling and it aligns with the zeitgeist, that gets shared. But some of it is people share stuff to look clever and cool and to show that they have a heart and to show that they're interesting and they've got a sense of humor. And so we try to imbue that into our media and get it shared that way.
Is that, you said humour, is that one of the keys? I mean, you like to have a good laugh, you guys, don't you? And
yeah.
You put a funny spin on most stuff, and lists, you love lists as well.
Yeah. Lists are big and humour is big, but it's funny, people share things to... We think of content as like content gifts, right? People want to express themselves and show what they're into, and some of it is sometimes it's funny, but some of it is just say, hey, I have a heart, or I believe in this human rights issue, or this is something that really interests me, and so we give them the gift and then they share it with their friends.
And the advertising model you use, that's what's quite different as well, your revenue model. You say that banner ads aren't the way to go anymore. You've got to integrate the advertising. How do you do that?
Yeah, I've been in digital media for about 15 years, and when I joined BuzzFeed as Chief Revenue Officer, my thought was, okay, I got to sell a bunch of banners and make some money. But what we found is that consumers don't like banner ads. Nobody clicks on them, and there's unlimited supply and not that much demand, and so because we were a startup, we took a different tact, and we decided to work with fewer advertisers and encourage them to make great content. So the content is native to the site. It doesn't look like advertising, but consumers know that it's from a brand, and if it's interesting and it speaks to them, they engage with it and they share it with their friends.
That's right. We almost have learnt to block out the banner ads in the way we even look at the webpage now.
Yeah, we call it banner blindness. It's really a scourge on the industry.
Way to put it.
Well, when was the last time you clicked on a banner? I read something like that you're more likely to get eaten by a great white shark than to click on a banner. I'm not sure about that stat, but I think there's something like that.
I'm not sure about that stat either.
Yeah. Maybe in Australia you're more likely to get eaten by a shark. I'm not sure.
You mentioned the sponsored sort of content.
Yes.
Is it a challenge sometimes if you get briefed to sort of come up with an idea, or do you really sort of you haven't had any problems so far?
Well, it takes a little bit of an extra step. Instead of just like trafficking a banner ad, that's very easy. But when we work with brands, we got to figure out what they stand for. What are the themes that they want to own, and then we create stuff. And we call it the Facebook test. We look at that branded content and we say, like, would I want to see this in my news feed? Would I click on it? Would I share it with my friends? And if it passes those tests, then we think it has a good chance to go viral.
Yeah.
And this is the branded paid content we're talking about. So
Yes.
do you often have to knock advertisers back and say, we don't want your content displayed in that way, or have a bit of an argument with them?
Yeah, the first time out is a bit rough because advertisers are used to paying for what they want to say, but we know that at the end of the day we're going to be judged on engagement rates and how well it was shared, and so there's some good-natured back and forth about hey, this smells too much like an ad, you should make it funnier or make it more heartwarming and be on brand, but make it so somebody wants to share it.
Sure. Andy, talk to us a little bit about the international expansion. Tell us about Australia, and is it different to what you're doing elsewhere, or is there similar things happening in a lot of countries?
Yeah, we're pleased with the international growth, and I think hipsters around the world discovered BuzzFeed and came to BuzzFeed US, and we found that especially in Canada, the UK, and Australia, we were getting an audience. And so about 6 months ago, we opened our office in the UK, and we found that traffic went from 2 million uniques to 10 million uniques, because instead of talking about US things, we were talking about footy wives and whatever they're into in London. And so in Australia, we got about 2 million unique visitors, and our goal in launching BuzzFeed Australia is to create content that Australians can love, things that are uniquely Australian, that people can identify with, and 12 reasons why you're from West Sydney or Western suburbs, or 12 reasons why it's so great to be a Rabbitohs fan. We think that kind of content that's localized and based on identity will get shared at a greater rate.
So how do they come across the content to make these kind of lists and whatnot? Where do they gather the information from?
Yeah, our staff by and large is very young. They grew up on the internet. They don't think of newspapers as the news. They're on Twitter and they're on a variety of other sites, and they got a good feel for what's trending in the zeitgeist. And they just create this stuff. They create images. They create original content that is sort of now and current and shareable. That's sort of our model.
Now, you're the revenue guy.
Yes.
You can see a lot of old media is playing big time on the web as well. Newspapers are building big audiences. They're having trouble replicating their print revenues online. Do you think that'll change in the future? Do you think advertising revenues will take off online?
I think so. I think the newspaper model is a rough one, because you're reporting and aggregating and curating the news, and then you print it up, and then you share it a day late. I think newspaper business is tough. I think the news business has never been better. I think where we've taken it a step further is we don't just report on the news. We make it shareable, and we think about why consumers would share it. And I think that...
You're sort of different, aren't you? Presumably there's room for both, do you think?
Yeah, I think so.
The New York Times and BuzzFeed, and
yeah, I think
the Sydney
so.
Morning Herald and BuzzFeed.
Yeah, I think most newspapers are figuring out that in order to grow audience, you have to make things shareable. And I think that's our model. We're not encumbered by printing presses and traditional things, but I think that over time people will realize that social news is a powerful thing.
Yes.
Okay,
Yeah.
Andy, thank you so much for joining James and I on the desk. We appreciate it.
Thanks for having me.
And BuzzFeed launching in Australia tomorrow, so if you click on the website, you'll see some Aussie content up there among everything else.
Absolutely.
Fantastic.
Thank
Thanks
you very
so much. All right, coming up on Media Week, we'll check in on the battle for TV ad dollars as Seven shares slips below 40%.